Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and this week I am hosting the Color Throwdown Challenge, which I will have linked on my blog along with the inspiration picture, which will make perfect sense when you see it after seeing this card. Because as usual, I went literal with my interpretation of it. So I'm starting off with Simon Says Stamps Artsy Fruits stamp set. And I'm using a variety of Simon Says ink, and I'm stamping it onto their 120 pound white cardstock to create my own pattern paper, basically. So I'm doing the classic rock and roll technique where I'm inking up the main part of this watermelon image with the lighter ink, which is their HOLLYHOCK ink, and then I'm rolling the bottom portion of the watermelon in their watermelon ink, which is one of the new colors that I just love. And then stamping that onto my cardstock, and then I'm stamping this sketchy sort of outline with black ink, and then the rind with the new key lime ink. And I'm not making it perfect. That's the whole kind of point of this set. You know, it's artsy. It's, you know, doesn't need to be lined up perfectly. So I'm just going along and stamping it. I've obviously super sped this up just to, so we're not just sitting here staring at me stamp this over and over again. But it really didn't take that long. And I'm just stamping everything, letting some of them stamp off the edges of the paper. It just looks better this way. I had this cut down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 because I wasn't sure if I wanted it to be, you know, the full card front or if I was going to die cut it down later, that sort of thing. So I gave myself that little bit of wiggle room. So I just went along and kept inking up the stamp and then rolling it in the darker ink, stamping it, stamping the outline, stamping the rind. And then, of course, I couldn't resist adding some splatter to this because I didn't like how just the way it looked as is. I wanted a little less white space. So I got out my splatter cubby, which especially when I'm doing black splatter, it gets everywhere. And then I'm using my distress ink, the black soot distress ink, and I'm just smushing that onto an acrylic block, adding a little bit of water, mixing that around with my paintbrush, and then I just flick my paintbrush against the edge of the acrylic block, and I've got my little bit of splatter. So just add a little bit of that and then let it dry. And then for my main image, I am using the Simon Says Funny Food stamp set that I've used a few times. And I love this set. It's so cute. But the minute I saw the watermelon image in the Artsy Fruit set, I remembered that there was this little watermelon character in the Funny Food set. So of course they go together perfectly. So I stamped that onto the same cardstock with the intense black ink. And then I'm using Copic Markers to color it in. I've got them on the screen here. So just starting, this time going lightest to darkest. Usually my MO is I go darkest to lightest, but sometimes I like to mix it up and do something different. Just kind of depends. And with Copics, you can kind of do whatever you want. It's just whatever you're comfortable with. So I started with the pinks first and just kind of went back and forth to really blend these out. And then once I've got those done, I'm going to go in that little like inner rind area, and I'm just using my YG quadruple 0 because it's very, very pale. So just to add that little bit of color, but keep it mostly white. And then for the rind itself, I started with the YG 06, and then I'm going to add some of the YG 07, which is just slightly darker, and then blend that back out with the YG 06. And then I'm going to go in with the G09 and just do little squiggles back and forth to kind of create the look of the rind. So really simple, don't have to be too fancy with that at all. And I also use that to color in their little feet. And then finally I'm going to go in with C8 and color in all of the seeds. So once I have all of that done, I pulled out my Pilot envelope addressing pen, and it's just a super, super black detail pen. And I went over the little smiley face, and you can see what a big difference that makes. So I just redotted their little eyes with it and went over the little smile with it, and then that was good. And then I pulled out my white gel pen to add some little highlights and some little dots of the seeds. And then I did little like kind of squiggles and dots on the rind to really give it that look and that little extra bit of texture. I'm kind of obsessed. I always go in and out with using the white gel pen, but I love the detail it adds without a whole lot of effort. Adding a few little dots and little highlights and things like that just totally takes a colored image to the next level, I think. So I added my little details, and then I grabbed the coordinating die for this image. I'm going to tape it into place with some micropore tape, and then I'm going to run it through my die cut machine. And while I was doing that, I did decide to die cut my background that I'd created. So I die cut that with the largest of the Simon Says stitched rectangle dies. So die cut that. I also die cut my sentiment using the new script thanks die. So I die cut the one layer with white cardstock and the actual word from black cardstock. So I've got all my die cutting done, and then decided I wanted to frame my little images. So I die cut some vellum with one of the large tags die from Simon. So now I'm kind of got everything ready to go, and I wanted to add to this little sentiment. So in the funny food set, there's that little "You're one in a melon" stamp, and I thought it'd be perfect to stamp just the "a melon" on the bottom of this tag here. So I used my anti-static powder tool and use that on the bottom, and then I taped off all the rest of this sentiment that I didn't want to ink up, just because it was easier to tape it off rather than trying to cut this apart or anything like that. So I just taped it out with Scotch tape, inked up the stamp, and then I can stamp it. I inked it up with the Simon Says clear embossing ink, and then I'm coating it with my Wow, it's black embossing powder, but it has a specific name that I can never remember. Primary Ebony embossing powder. So stamp that, heat embossed it with the embossing powder, then wiped off that excess anti-static powder. And then I'm going to adhere these two die cuts together with my multi-medium matte adhesive from Ranger, because this is a very like finicky kind of detailed little sentiment here. So get that adhered to the white cardstock. And then I'm going to start figuring out how I'm going to adhere all this to my tag. So I ended up deciding to adhere my little watermelon character with a piece of foam tape. So he's popped up. And then the actual thanks sentiment, I'm just going to adhere flat to the vellum with some more multi-medium matte adhesive. So it'll say "Thanks, a melon." I thought I was very clever with that. So anyway, adhered that into place. And then I grabbed some Lawn Fawn trimmings. They're like hemp twine, and I don't remember the color of it offhand, but I'll have a link to it in the supplies. But I quadrupled it up and then fed that through the hole in the tag, and then pulled that through and pulled it tight, just to give it a little extra something. And then I'm going to just trim that down with my scissors. So that kind of finishes this tag off. And then to adhere the tag to the card, I'm using foam tape, but I'm making sure to apply it behind the watermelon little character as well as this die cut sentiment, because otherwise you're going to see the adhesive through the vellum. So I trimmed some of the little pieces down small enough to fit behind the sentiment, and then this way I can just press this into place and adhere it to my card front. And then I also decided, just for a little bit of extra security, to squeeze some of this multimedia matte behind that hemp cord. So once that dries, it will just like lock everything into place. So got all of this adhered, and then I added some little Doodlebug LIMEADE glitter sprinkles just to finish off the embellishments on my card. And then my card base is more 120 pound white cardstock that I'd cut to 4 1/4 by 11 and scored at 5 1/2. So it's a top folding A2 size card. And I'm going to adhere my card front with just some Nouveau adhesive. So that gives me like a couple seconds to kind of wiggle everything around and make sure it's lined up properly on my card front. And then on the inside of the card, that's why I had colored and die cut that second little watermelon, and decided to just stamp that same "You're one in a melon" stamp, but this time ink up the whole stamp with the intense black ink. So lined everything up on my grid mat, inked up the stamp, stamped it onto the inside of my card, and then I can adhere that second little character with more Nouveau adhesive, and that finished off my card. So as always, there will be a link below my video to my blog post with links to the pictures, a list of the Copic colors used, all the supplies. All that info will be linked in the description box below the video, so you guys can check that out if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching, subscribing, and thumbs upping my videos. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye!